Hello everyone, this is the Iron Marshal, your favorite lover of history, engineering, specifically trains, and politics and history. Now in this video I will be giving my own little analysis about the potential invasion of Taiwan by the People's Republic of China. Now in this video I will be looking into the specifics of such an invasion. How would it play out? What kind of factors would an invader need to consider? And also I will be looking into the potential geopolitical ramifications of such an action on the part of the PRC. Now to get started, let me give a little historical background. Taiwan and China have existed in an awkward limbo state basically since the end of World War II. At the end of that conflict, the nationalist Chinese, led by Chiang Kai-shek, were evicted from the Chinese mainland by the communists, led by Mao Zedong. As a result, they fled to their last stronghold in Taiwan, which was historically a province of China. The communists took hold of the mainland but were unable to take Taiwan itself. Since that time, both nations have existed in this awkward state of tension. Neither really acknowledged the other's legitimacy. In recent years, however, China, by which I mean the communist Chinese, have upped the ante in terms of their determination to retake Taiwan, which they officially consider to be a rogue province. They have staged military drills, blockades of a sort, and they have made many inflammatory statements threatening Taiwan's sovereignty and independence. Now, first off, we need to analyze the military specifics of these two nations. Now, surprise, surprise, communist China far outstrips Taiwan, but we still need to look at the numbers here. According to Economic Times, China has 1.74 million active personnel and around 500,000 reserves spread across 4 different services. The Navy is the largest in terms of sheer number of ships, though it is outclassed in terms of tonnage by the US Navy. It also has 2 aircraft carriers in service, one of only a handful of nations to have them. It also has a 3rd one in testing, but that's a matter for another day. Now, according to the Global Firepower Index, by comparison, Taiwan has 215,000 active personnel and 2.31 million reserves. This is important. This means that numerically, despite Taiwan having only a fraction of the population of China, it has roughly similar armed forces in terms of numbers. They have a lot more reserves to call upon than China, though China could potentially have more troops from the get-go, considering the fact that they vastly outnumber the Taiwanese military. Now, with that out of the way, we also need to look into the financial aspect. According to the Council on Foreign Relations, in 2023, Taiwan's defense budget amounted to $19.1 billion. Respectable, but we also need to look at China. China's defense budget in 2024 amounted to $236 billion. At present, China has the world's 2nd largest defense budget, second only to the United States. And even though these figures aren't 100% accurate owing to the famous lack of transparency on the part of the communist government, it is important to consider that there is still a gigantic gap between these two nations. However, one also needs to look at the reality on the ground. Numbers alone don't mean everything. Taiwan has, shall we say, infamously difficult territory. The country is very much mountainous, and as many invading armies have found out to their sorrow, fighting in mountains is an absolute hell. Now, another thing to consider is the fact that Taiwan is an island. As a result, any invasion would have to be brought in over the Taiwan Strait, a body of water which at its widest point stretches to 180 kilometers. It also has 2 monsoon seasons, and as a result, an invasion would only be viable for a few months each year. Now, Taiwan's west coast also has a lot of shallow water, which would make it extremely difficult for ships to traverse. Never mind the various defenses Taiwan could and probably has already set up to defend that area. Going around to the east coast presents its own problems. While they don't have the problem of shallow water, they do have the problem of massive cliffs which overlook almost the entire section of Taiwan. Now, if any of you have read up on the history of naval invasions, for example, the one at Gallipoli, you'll know that if the enemy has the high ground, you're basically screwed. Attacking a major port would also be a bit of a mixed blessing for China. Taiwan has very few major deep water ports, and it could easily destroy them in order to deny the PLA any advantage. Going after Taipei would be a good move if the PLA's goal was to dethrone the Taiwanese government, but the city itself is basically sandwiched between a bunch of mountains. Again, that age-old problem arises. Even if the PLA were theoretically to be able to break through these mountain ranges, it would come at enormous cost. And even with China's immense resources, it's difficult to say whether or not the Chinese people would tolerate these kinds of losses. Now, judging from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it is possible that failing at winning the battle on the ground, China could simply resort to bombing Taiwan into submission. And this is where another problem arises: Taiwan's allies. The United States features the most prominently, even though it maintains an official policy of strategic ambiguity. It's doubtful that the US would just stand to the sidelines if China were to invade Taiwan, considering all we know of those countries' rocky relations. Now, there's also Japan to consider. Japan and China have pretty dodgy relations, to say the least, and it is quite likely that, as a US ally, Japan would step in to assist in any kind of US intervention in Taiwan. You take all these things together and you have a serious risk of a global conflagration. That's not to speak of China's own allies, such as Russia, which has forged much closer ties with China in the recent past, especially since the invasion of Ukraine commenced. This put together presents a serious risk of triggering a whole new World War III, and that wouldn't be a good outcome for anyone. And all this as a result of two countries that cannot get along. Regardless of what happens if China invades Taiwan, I think we can all agree that the inevitable result would cause mass suffering and destruction, just like Russia has done in Ukraine. I'll leave you to consider the rest. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment below. This is the Iron Marshal, signing off.